May Louise Carter had been waking up at 4:30 in the morning for the past 42 years. Not because she loved the darkness or the cold floors beneath her bare feet, but because work was sacred to her. Work meant dignity. Work meant she could look anyone in the eye without owing them a single thing. She lived in a small house on Maple Street, the kind of place that had seen better decades but still held warmth in its bones. The porch sagged a little on the left side, and the paint had started peeling near the gutters, but inside, everything was spotless. May kept her home the way she kept her life, clean, ordered, honest. That Tuesday morning, she moved through her routine with practiced grace. Coffee in the blue ceramic mug her late husband James had given her on their 20th anniversary. 2 slices of toast with a thin layer of strawberry jam. The morning news playing softly on the kitchen radio, though she barely listened anymore. The world had grown so loud, so angry. She preferred the quiet dot by 5:15. May was dressed in her work uniform, navy blue pants, a button-down shirt with the company logo stitched above her heart, and comfortable shoes that had walked more miles than most cars. She grabbed her keys from the hook by the door and stepped outside into the purple-gray light of dawn. Her car sat in the driveway like an old friend waiting patiently. A 1930 Cadillac V16, midnight black with chrome trim that still caught the light when the sun hit it right. Most people who saw it assumed it was a relic, something that belonged in a museum rather than a working woman's driveway. They didn't know its story. They didn't know what it meant. James had restored it himself, piece by piece, over 15 years. He'd found it rusting in a barn outside Birmingham, nothing but a skeleton and a dream. Every weekend, every vacation day, every spare hour, he'd poured himself into that machine. When he finished, he'd handed May the keys with tears in his eyes and said, "This is our legacy, baby. This car will outlive us both." He'd been gone 7 years now, taken by a heart attack that came without warning on a Sunday afternoon. But the Cadillac remained. And every time May turned that key and heard the engine rumble to life, she felt James sitting beside her, felt his hand on her shoulder, felt him whispering that everything would be all right. She arrived at Hale Industries by 6 o'clock, as she always did. The parking lot was empty, except for the security guard's truck and the delivery vans that came early to stock the cafeteria. May parked in the back corner, in the same spot she'd used for 23 years. She grabbed her cleaning supplies from the trunk and walked toward the side entrance, her footsteps echoing in the morning stillness. The building was massive, 12 stories of glass and steel that had risen from an empty field when May was still a young woman. She'd watched it grow, watched the company expand, watched 3 different CEOs come and go. Now Richard Hale sat in the corner office on the top floor, the youngest CEO in company history, and the most arrogant man May had ever encountered. She didn't think about him much. Didn't have to. Their worlds rarely intersected. He arrived after 9 and left before 5, surrounded by assistants and investors and people who laughed too loudly at his jokes. May arrived in darkness and left in daylight, surrounded by mops and buckets and the satisfaction of a job well done. They were 2 planets in different orbits, but that Tuesday, the orbits would collide, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The afternoon sun pressed hard against the asphalt, turning the parking lot into a shimmering sea of heat. May had finished her shift early that day. The executive floor had been empty because of some off-site meeting, and she breezed through her cleaning rounds in record time. By 2 o'clock, she was walking toward her Cadillac, already thinking about the leftover soup waiting in her refrigerator. That's when she noticed the problem. Her usual spot in the back corner had been blocked by a delivery truck that morning, forcing her to park closer to the building. Much closer, right next to the row of spaces marked Executive Reserved. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. The spots were empty, and she'd be gone before anyone important arrived, but the meeting had ended early. And now Richard Hale was standing beside his red Ferrari, staring at her Cadillac like it had personally insulted his mother. May slowed her pace, but didn't stop. She'd learned long ago that hesitation showed weakness, and weakness invited trouble. She kept walking, steady and calm, her keys jingling softly against her worn work pants. "You parked here." Hale's voice cut through the heat, sharp and cold despite the temperature. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than May's entire wardrobe. His hair slicked back, his jaw tight with barely contained irritation. May looked up, meeting his eyes with the same steady gaze she'd used on difficult people her whole life. "All the other spaces were filled this morning, sir." Behind Hale, a cluster of men in expensive suits watched with barely disguised amusement. Investors, May guessed. The kind of people who treated corporate drama like entertainment. One of them had his phone out, the camera already recording. Hale laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You thought parking your junk next to a Ferrari was a good idea?" He gestured dramatically at both vehicles, playing to his audience. "What is this thing anyway? A time machine?" The investors chuckled. More phones appeared, cameras clicking and recording. A small crowd of employees had gathered near the building entrance, drawn by the commotion. May didn't respond. She simply walked to her car, unlocked the door, and began checking the mirrors the way she always did before driving. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. Inside, her heart ached with a familiar pain, the pain of being dismissed, diminished, reduced to something less than human by someone who would never understand her worth. But she'd carried that pain before. She could carry it again. "You know who owns this company?" Hale stepped closer, lowering his voice to something between a whisper and a threat. "Doesn't change where the open space was this morning," May said quietly. Her tone stayed flat, polite, careful. A ripple of surprised murmurs moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Did she just talk back to him?" Another voice replied, "This old lady's got nerve." Hale's face flushed with anger and something else, embarrassment, perhaps at being challenged by someone he considered beneath him. He glanced at his investors, at the cameras, at the growing audience. And in that moment, May saw the decision form behind his eyes. He was going to make an example of her. "Tell you what," Hale said, his voice rising so everyone could hear. "Since you're brave enough to park next to me, let's make this interesting." He leaned in, a smug smile spreading across his face. "Race me. Your antique against my Ferrari. If that junk heap beats me, you can have my company." Gasps echoed across the parking lot. Someone dropped their phone. The security guard near the entrance shook his head in disbelief. May blinked slowly, letting the words settle. "You want to race? Over a parking spot?" "No." Hale tapped the Ferrari's hood, enjoying the attention. "I want to show these gentlemen what real power looks like." "So what do you say? You in?" The crowd leaned forward, phones raised higher. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. May looked at the Cadillac, at James's Cadillac, and felt something shift inside her. Not anger, not fear, something quieter, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. "You're sure about this?" she asked. Hale grinned. "Absolutely." May nodded once. "All right then." And just like that, the race that would change everything began with a single word from a woman who had never raised her voice in her life. The story spread through the building, like wildfire catching dry brush. By the time May and Richard Hale had moved to the far end of the parking lot, where the access road stretched long and straight toward the back gate, a trail of employees followed behind them, whispering and recording and shaking their heads. "He really made the janitor race him," someone said. "Hale's showing off again," another replied. "But this time, he's gone too far. That poor woman. She doesn't stand a chance." May heard the whispers. She'd been hearing whispers her whole life in school hallways and church parking lots, in grocery stores and waiting rooms, in every space where people decided she was less important than their comfort. The whispers used to hurt. Now they just reminded her of who she was dealing with. She opened the Cadillac's hood with a slow, steady motion, letting the old hinges creak. The engine inside wasn't original. James had replaced it years ago with something more powerful, something modern hidden beneath the classic exterior. He'd always said the car was like May herself, beautiful on the outside, but with hidden strength that no one expected. She checked the hoses, tightened a strap, nudged a loose latch back into place. Simple movements, no rush, no nerves. Her breathing stayed even, like she'd done this every day for decades. Because she had. James had taught her everything about this engine, had made sure she could maintain it long after he was gone. Across the lot, Hale strutted around his Ferrari like a peacock displaying feathers. "Look at this masterpiece," he announced to his investors. 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. 700 horsepower. This is what success looks like. He slid his hand across the hood, making sure it caught the reflection of every camera. The crowd murmured appreciatively. A young manager named Derek, who had always been friendly to May in the break room, stood near the back of the crowd, his face twisted with concern. "Miss Carter," he called out softly, "you don't have to do this. No one expects you to actually race him." May closed the hood and wiped her hands on her work towel. "I know, baby. But sometimes expectations are exactly what need breaking." Derek opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He'd known May for 8 years, and watched her work harder than anyone else in the building, while receiving less recognition than anyone deserved. If she wanted to do this, who was he to stop her? A supervisor named Patricia stepped forward, her expression caught between amusement and administrative panic. "We should probably talk about liability," she started. "It's a private lot on private property," Hale interrupted, climbing into his Ferrari. "My property. My rules. I say we race." He revved the engine, and the sound boomed across the asphalt like thunder, making people flinch. May didn't flinch. She simply walked around her car, settled into the driver's seat, and adjusted the rearview mirror. The leather was cracked and worn, molded to the shape of her body after years of driving. She placed her hands on the steering wheel, the same wheel James had gripped on their first drive together. The same wheel she'd held while crying the day of his funeral. "I'm with you," she whispered to the empty passenger seat. "I know you're with me." The crowd pressed closer, forming a loose corridor along the access road. Patricia raised her hand, having apparently accepted her role as unofficial starter. "On my signal," she called out, her voice shaking slightly. The Ferrari's engine roared like a caged animal. The Cadillac's engine gave a soft, uneven hum, a sound that made several people chuckle nervously. Hale rolled down his window. "Hope that thing can even move," he shouted. May didn't look at him. She just tightened her grip on the steering wheel, exhaled once, slow and deep, and fixed her eyes on the road ahead. Patricia's hand dropped. "Go!" The Ferrari shot forward, tires screeching against the pavement. The car surging down the road like it wanted the spotlight as much as its owner did. The crowd cheered and shouted, phones tracking the red blur as it rocketed toward the distant finish line. May pulled off the line quietly. No screech. No drama. Just a steady acceleration that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. "She's not even trying." Someone laughed. "Man, this is going to be embarrassing." But Derek noticed something the others didn't. May's face wasn't embarrassed. It wasn't scared. It was focused, completely, utterly focused. And for some reason, that quiet focus made him stop laughing and start watching very, very carefully. The Ferrari screamed down the access road, its engine echoing off the warehouse buildings that lined the route. Richard Hale gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, grinning at the speedometer as the numbers climbed higher and higher. This was his moment. This was what power felt like. Docked behind him. Far, far behind him, the old Cadillac rolled forward at what seemed like a leisurely pace. Hale checked his rearview mirror and laughed out loud. She wasn't even trying to compete. Perfect. The humiliation would be complete. But halfway down the route, something changed. The Ferrari's smooth roar shifted. A sharp sputter cut through the sound, followed by a cough that shook the entire frame. Hale frowned and pressed the accelerator harder. The pedal gave resistance it shouldn't have. A warning light blinked on the dashboard, then another, lighting up like a Christmas tree of mechanical failure. "Not now," Hale muttered. "Not now, not now, not now." He tapped the wheel nervously, a habit he didn't realize he had. The engine coughed again, harder this time. Heat radiated from somewhere beneath the hood, filling the cabin with a faint metallic smell that made his stomach turn. He tried one more desperate push of the accelerator. The Ferrari lurched forward, shuddered violently, and died in the middle of the lane. Silence swallowed him. Complete, devastating silence. Hale sat frozen, staring at the dead dashboard, unable to process what had just happened. His $700,000 machine, his symbol of success, his proof of superiority, dead, broken, useless. Sweat gathered on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. Behind him, he could hear the distant shouts of the crowd, could imagine the phones capturing every second of his failure. His hands trembled as he opened the door and stepped onto the hot pavement. The Ferrari sat there like a betrayed promise, steam beginning to rise from beneath its sleek hood, and then he heard it. The soft, steady hum of the Cadillac's engine, growing louder with each passing second. Not fast, not aggressive, just constant, reliable. The sound of something that had been built to last. May's car rolled up beside the stalled Ferrari, its old body rattling slightly over every bump in the road. The sun glinted off the faded chrome trim, turning the worn metal into something almost beautiful. She slowed to a stop and leaned out her window. Her face was calm, her voice even softer. "Need a lift?" Hale stared at her. His mouth opened, but no words came out. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. Not to him. Not in front of everyone. "You can't be serious." He finally managed. May reached over and unlocked the passenger door. The click echoed louder than it should have. Louder than the distant murmurs of the approaching crowd. Louder than the blood pounding in Hale's ears. "Race hasn't ended," she said simply. "You want to finish or not?" The crowd was catching up now, jogging down the access road with phones raised high. Their voices carried on the hot air. "Is the Ferrari broken?" "No way. This can't be real." Hale looked at the approaching cameras, at the investors who were witnessing his complete and total humiliation, at Patricia with her hand over her mouth in shock, at Derek whose expression had shifted from concern to something that looked almost like hope. Every second he stood there made it worse. Every moment of hesitation dug his grave deeper. With no other choice, Richard Hale, CEO of a billion-dollar company, climbed into the passenger seat of the janitor's 1930 Cadillac. The leather creaked beneath his expensive suit. The door closed with a solid thunk that felt like the end of something. May pulled the car back into gear and started, driving toward the finish line. Slow, steady, unhurried. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the engine's gentle hum and the distant shouts of the crowd as they realized what they were witnessing. The arrogant millionaire, riding shotgun in the beaten-up car he had mocked just minutes before. Hale stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. His hands balled into fists against his thighs. Every cell in his body screamed with humiliation, with rage, with the desperate need to take back control. But for the first time in his adult life, Richard Hale was not in control, and the woman beside him, the woman he dismissed as nothing, as nobody, as beneath his notice, was steering the entire story. The Cadillac rolled across the finish line with no rush at all. No roar of victory. No showmanship. Just a gentle rumble that made the moment feel almost ordinary. Except nothing about this moment was ordinary. And everyone knew it. Workers and investors crowded around the line, having sprinted down the access road to witness the ending. Phones were raised like torches, capturing every angle, every expression, every second of what would become the most shared video the company had ever produced. When the old car finally stopped, every eye locked on the passenger door it open slowly. Richard Hale stepped out. His face was pale, drained of its usual arrogant color. His designer shirt clung to his back, soaked with sweat despite the Cadillac's surprisingly effective air conditioning. His jaw worked silently, searching for words that refused to come. The phones captured everything, every twitch, every blink, every moment of his undoing. He lost, someone whispered, as if saying it out loud might make it more real. He actually lost. Man drove a Ferrari and still got carried to the finish, another voice added. The words weren't mean. They were stunned. May got out of the car slowly, stretching her legs like she'd just finished a regular drive to the grocery store. She rubbed her knee, an old injury from a fall years ago, and squinted at the afternoon sun. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. She just stood there, calm and patient, letting the moment breathe on its own. Derek pushed through the crowd and approached her, his eyes wide. Miss Carter, that was. I don't even know what that was. Just a drive, May said softly. Nothing more. The silence around them grew heavier, wrapped in disbelief and the uncomfortable realization that power wasn't always what it seemed to be. Hale cleared his throat. Listen, everyone. His voice cracked on the second word. This wasn't exactly what it looked like. The Ferrari had a mechanical issue. It wasn't. You said she could have the company if she won. The interruption came from a young employee named Marcus, his tone factual rather than accusatory. We all heard it. The whole thing is recorded, someone else added. Multiple angles. Hale's face flushed red. It was a joke. A figure of speech. Nobody actually expected. Nobody expected her to win, Derek said quietly. That's what you mean, right? The words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. May stepped forward. The crowd parted for her without being asked, creating a path between her and Hale. She stopped about 3 feet away from him, close enough for him to see the lines on her face, the gray in her hair, the calluses on her hands from decades of honest work. I didn't race for your company, she said. Her voice was steady, neither loud nor soft. I raced because you asked me to. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, she's letting him off. Another shook their head in disbelief. I'm not here to take anything from you, May continued. Not your job. Not your money. Not your pride. She paused, letting the words settle. I just wanted to finish what you started. Hale blinked rapidly, confusion mixing with the shame on his face. He'd expected anger. He'd expected demands. He'd braced himself for a public takedown that would destroy whatever remained of his dignity. Instead, this woman, this janitor, was offering him grace he hadn't earned and didn't deserve. Why? The word escaped his lips before he could stop it. May tilted her head slightly. Because taking you down wouldn't lift me up. And I've spent too many years learning that lesson to forget it now. She turned and walked back toward her Cadillac, moving with the same unhurried pace she'd used all afternoon. The crowd watched in silence, phones slowly lowering as people realized they'd witnessed something more significant than a race. They'd witnessed The moment an ordinary woman chose mercy over revenge, and somehow made that choice feel more powerful than any victory could have been. But May's grace did not mean there would be no consequences. As she walked back toward her car, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot, moving faster than corporate vehicles usually did. The doors opened before it fully stopped, and 3 people emerged: a gray-haired woman in a charcoal suit, a younger man with a tablet clutched to his chest, and an older gentleman whose expression could have frozen water. The crowd recognized them immediately. Board members. The people who actually controlled Hale Industries. The gray-haired woman, Catherine Price, chairwoman of the board, walked straight toward Richard Hale without acknowledging anyone else. Her heels clicked against the pavement like a countdown timer. Richard. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of an avalanche. "We need to talk. Now." Hale's face went even paler. "Catherine, I can explain. Not here." She cut him off without raising her voice. "The conference room." 5 minutes. Her eyes swept across the crowd, across the phone still recording, across the mess her CEO had created. "Everyone else, return to your workstations. This spectacle is over." The crowd began to disperse slowly, reluctantly, people glancing over their shoulders as they walked away. Whispers filled the air like static electricity. May had almost reached her car when Catherine Price appeared beside her. Up close, the chairwoman looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from years of managing men who thought they were smarter than everyone else. "Mrs. Carter." Catherine's voice softened slightly. "I apologize for what happened here today. It was inexcusable." May nodded slowly. "Thank you, ma'am. But you don't need to apologize for him." "No, I do." Catherine's jaw tightened. "I'm responsible for who leads this company, which means I'm responsible when that leader fails." She paused, studying May's face with keen eyes. The board was watching the live stream. One of the investors was broadcasting to his partners. May absorbed this information without visible reaction. "I see. There will be a formal investigation," Catherine continued. "Suspension. Review of leadership. Likely more." She hesitated, something complicated moving behind her professional mask. "I watched how you handled yourself out there. You had every right to humiliate him." "You didn't." "Humiliation doesn't change people," May said quietly. "It just makes them smaller. And small people cause small problems forever." Catherine stared at her for a long moment. "You're wiser than anyone I currently employ in a leadership position." "I've just been alive a long time, ma'am. You learn things when you pay attention." A small smile crossed Catherine's face, the first genuine expression May had seen from her. "Would you be willing to speak with the board?" "Not as a witness. As an advisor." She held up a hand before May could respond. "I know how that sounds. But I saw something out there that this company has been missing for years. Real leadership. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need an audience." May looked back at the building, at the glass towers she'd cleaned for over 2 decades, at the windows she'd washed and floors she'd mopped, at the company that had never once asked her opinion about anything. "If it helps people treat each other better," she said finally, "I'll listen to what you have to say." Catherine nodded. "That's all I ask." She turned to walk away, then paused. "Mrs. Carter? That car of yours belonged to my husband," May said. "He built it himself. He built something special." Catherine's voice carried genuine admiration. "And I don't just mean the car." She walked away toward the building, leaving May alone beside the Cadillac. In the distance, through the glass doors, May could see Hale being escorted toward the elevator by the 2 other board members. His shoulders were slumped, his swagger completely gone. She didn't feel happy about it. She didn't feel victorious. She just felt tired. the deep, bone-level tiredness of someone who had seen too much of life to celebrate anyone's downfall. "Rest easy, James," she whispered, placing her hand on the Cadillac's warm hood. "We did okay today." The video went viral within hours. By that evening, it had been viewed over 2 million times across various platforms. News outlets picked it up by morning. Headlines ranged from sensational to sincere. CEO humiliated by elderly janitor in parking lot race. The Cadillac that conquered a Ferrari. When arrogance meets grace, the video everyone is talking about. May watched none of it. She went home, ate her leftover soup, called her daughter Denise in Atlanta, and went to bed at her usual time. The world could spin itself into a frenzy. She had laundry to do, but the world refused to leave her alone. Reporters showed up at her house the next morning, their vans lining Maple Street like an invading army. May answered the door in her bathrobe, looked at the microphones and cameras pointed at her face, and said simply, "I'm not interested in being famous. I'm interested in getting to work on time." Then she closed the door, got dressed, and drove her Cadillac to Hale Industries, like she did every other day. The parking lot felt different when she arrived. Quieter, more respectful. Employees who had never spoken to her before nodded as she walked past. Some offered small smiles. A few stopped her to shake her hand. "Miss Carter," one young woman said, her voice trembling slightly. "What you did out there, it meant something to a lot of us." May patted her arm gently. "Then let it mean something good, baby. Don't let it mean anger or revenge. Let it mean that quiet people matter too." The news about Richard Hale came in fragments throughout the day, passed through whispers and break-room conversations. Suspended pending investigation. Leadership review initiated. Stock prices wobbling. Investors reconsidering their positions. By Friday, the board announced his formal removal as CEO. The press release used words like mutual agreement and new direction. But everyone knew the truth. Richard Hale had been undone not by a business rival or a legal scandal, but by his own arrogance and a woman he'd considered beneath his notice. May learned about his termination while mopping the third-floor hallway. Derek found her there, his face a complicated mix of emotions. "He's gone," Derek said. "They announced it an hour ago." May wrung out her mop and continued working. Okay. Derek stared at her. "Miss Carter, you basically ended his career. Don't you feel, I don't know, something?" May paused her work and looked at him with tired eyes. "I feel sad, if you want the truth." "Sad? After how he treated you?" "Sad because he had everything," May said quietly. "Money, power, success, and it wasn't enough. He still needed to make someone else feel small to feel big himself. That's a kind of poverty, Derek. The worst kind. The kind money can't fix." Derek was silent for a long moment. "You really don't hate him?" "Hate takes energy I don't have to spare." May resumed mopping. "I've got floors to clean and a granddaughter's birthday coming up. That's where my energy goes." She finished her shift and walked out to the parking lot as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The Cadillac sat waiting for her, steady and patient as always. As she approached the car, she noticed something new. A small envelope had been tucked beneath the windshield wiper. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive stationery. "Mrs. Carter, the board would like to offer you a position as cultural advisor. Your wisdom is exactly what we need. Please consider it. Catherine Price." May read the note twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket. She didn't know if she would accept. Didn't know if she wanted that kind of attention, that kind of responsibility. But as she drove home through the golden evening light, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. 3 months later, May Louise Carter stood in front of 200 employees in the company auditorium. She was wearing a simple navy dress, not expensive. but clean and pressed, and her hands were steady despite the hundreds of eyes watching her. She had accepted Catherine's offer, though not in the way anyone expected. She didn't want a title, didn't want an office, didn't want a salary increase. She wanted one thing, permission to speak. And now, for the first quarterly culture and values meeting the company had ever held, she had the floor. "I've worked in this building for 23 years, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "In all that time, I've cleaned every office, every bathroom, every conference room. I've been here at dawn, and I've been here at midnight. I've watched people come and go, get promoted and get fired, succeed and fail." She paused, letting the silence settle. "And in all that time, almost nobody ever asked my name." An uncomfortable shifting rippled through the audience. People glanced at each other, at their shoes, at anywhere but directly at the woman on stage. "I'm not saying that to make anyone feel guilty," May continued. "I'm saying it because it's the truth, and truth is where change starts. We can't fix what we won't see." She looked out at the sea of faces, young and old, different colors and backgrounds. People she'd watched grow up in this company without ever speaking to directly. That race in the parking lot. People keep asking me about it. They want to know how I beat a Ferrari. They want to know the secret. A small smile crossed her face. "But there's no secret. His car broke down. Mine didn't. That's all. I didn't win because I was faster. I won because I was still moving when he stopped." She let that sink in. Life is like that too. The flashy ones, the loud ones, the ones who need everyone to see how important they are. They break down eventually, because they're running on ego, and ego runs out. But the steady ones, the quiet ones, the ones who just keep doing the right thing even when nobody's watching, they finish the race. Derek was in the front row, wiping his eyes. He wasn't the only one. "I want to ask you all something," May said. "And I want you to really think about it before you answer. Who in this company have you never spoken to? Who do you walk past every day without seeing? Who does the work that keeps this place running, but never gets invited to the meetings?" She stepped away from the podium. "Find those people. Learn their names. Ask them about their lives. Because a company isn't just executives and investors. It's everyone. And if everyone doesn't feel like they matter, then nothing else matters either." The applause started slowly, then built into something thunderous. People rose to their feet, not because they were supposed to, but because they couldn't help themselves. May nodded once, accepting the response with the same quiet dignity she'd shown that day in the parking lot. Then she walked off the stage, back to her regular life, back to her mop and bucket and the work she'd done for 42 years. But something had changed. Not in her. She was the same woman she'd always been. But in the people around her, in the company, in the way employees looked at each other in the hallways. They started learning names. Started saying good morning to the janitors and the security guards and the cafeteria workers. Started treating everyone like they mattered, because everyone did. And May Louise Carter, who had never asked for attention or recognition, became the most respected person in a building full of executives and investors, not because she won a race, but because she showed them what real victory looked like. Asterisk. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Unbroken Grace Stories community. Where are you watching from?